right, we're about to begin here. My name's Brian Frabel. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Velo, and thanks everyone for attending our webinar titled Content Doesn't Sell, People Do. We're going to geek out a little bit here in this one and talk about brain science or learning science, if you want to call it that, and how you can actually use how the human brain works physically and use some of that to make your sales enablement programs more effective. So getting into it first, a lot of times when we talk to customers or prospective clients, the conversation immediately goes to content. And many of you probably have seen these statistics, or you're even feeling these pain, and oftentimes it's related to my sellers can't find the content, my sellers don't use the content, they're wasting time. Oftentimes, when you kind of peel back the layers of the onion and you look at, okay, so why is it? There's a misalignment between sales and marketing, and in the worst case, sales and marketing don't barely talk to each other, or possibly they talk to each other, but you still have marketing creating content with a marketing lens as opposed to a sales lens. And obviously, if you're trying to deliver content to a salesperson, you want it to be useful in the sale, which is different than just kind of a marketing content. The other important thing is also to make sure that the marketing team knows what the sales team is being trained on, because if your content doesn't align to the training, then you're going to have that mismatch as well. But kind of the net of this is we oftentimes hear people attacking their sales enablement problems from a content first. And if we can just figure out our content, all will be perfect. However, the salesperson's job is getting a lot harder. Last week at the CEB Sales and Marketing Summit, CEB rolled out some new research, which now they are saying that the average B2B buying decision involves 6.8 decision makers. That's a lot of people for one salesperson to navigate, and obviously those 6.8 people aren't all from the same function and coming from the same perspective, and they don't care about the same things. So now your sales rep has to be able to talk in different languages, whether they're talking to the salesperson, the marketing person, possibly finance, IT, purchasing is often in there. So the salesperson's job is a lot harder than it ever has been before. So I was recently looking at some research from Aberdeen, and it was addressing this alignment of getting sales and marketing to work together, get the right content, the right enablement. And I stumbled upon this graph, and in the purple, it shows when you have strong alignment, the purple bar is higher than the orange bar when you don't have strong alignment between sales and marketing. Seemed okay, but then the thing that really struck me on this is this one on the far left. And I said, 81% to 85%. That doesn't feel very impactful. If I spend all that time and effort to align sales and marketing, make sure sales and marketing are aligned on the right content, I just get a 4% improvement. That seems like we're shooting way too low, and we can do better than that. And so I started asking myself, well, why? Why is that? And I realized that content doesn't sell, it's the people who sell. So you can get sales and marketing in a room, align your content needs, you can put it in a single repository, have the best delivery system, get it in their hands the moment they need it. But then you have to ask your question, do they know what to do with it? Do they know how to sell? Do they know how to handle objections? Do they know how to position your value versus the various competitors that you have? And no piece of aligned sales and marketing content, and I don't care how good the piece of content is going to do that by itself. And so I think the big mistake that we see a lot of sales enablement managers and programs is they tackle the content problem and completely forget about the human aspect of it, which is honestly, I think, more important than the content piece. So we're going to dive a little bit into that people part of it. I think the challenge for anybody developing a sales enablement program is pretty well, you put it into this kind of bell curve. 40% of sellers miss their quota, and the number of reasons that they lose deals is that they can't articulate value. Notice, and that's from Serious Decisions, and notice that is not the number one reason they lose deals is because they didn't have the right content. Content's part of the equation, but it's because the person can't articulate value. And if you look at really the objective of a good sales enablement program, what you're really looking to do is how do you get that middle of the bell curve just a couple percentage points to the right, because that would have huge impact. No matter how much revenue you have, huge impact on your business. The low performers typically will be low performers, probably shouldn't be in sales, they'll probably end up in marketing at some point. The high performers, some people just have a natural innate ability to sell, and you probably don't have to spend a ton of your time focused on them. But the best programs, well, how do I turn those 80% of my sellers in the middle of the bell curve and ooch them up a little bit to the right-hand side? So before I get into some of the brain science tips, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I think a good sales enablement program looks like, because even if you use some of the brain science tips that we're going to talk about, even if you fix your content problem, if you don't have the right process, you're still not going to be successful. So my little icon here, he or she is the seller. And what the seller needs is first content. And with content, you need to make sure that you align your content to the sales funnel. So if I am in a discovery meeting, the content I'm going to share is very different than proposal. As we work with a lot of our customers and do an inventory of their content, we often find that people will have a lot of top of funnel content, but as you go further down the funnel, it gets really, really a small number. So make sure you have what your sellers needs. We see also some sellers do a lot of vertical selling, and so if I'm going into a financial services company, it'd be great if the case study I was going to share with them was a financial services case study and not an automotive case study. So aligning content, and as I mentioned earlier up front, making sure that sales and marketing are aligned on what the content needs are for the seller. And I personally believe that means sales needs to be involved in the requirements of the marketing content. I would venture to guess that more than 3/4 of marketing teams don't include sales in the requirements piece. The second, as we said, content doesn't sell, is knowledge and skills. If you have a complex product line and your salespeople are being asked to sell a lot of things, it's probably too much for them to keep up on. And so the question is, how do I get them the knowledge and skills at the time they need it? And that we'll talk about that in a second with some of the brain science. New product launches, competitive landscape. This is a constant need. This is not a onboard and then best of luck. This is not we do the 1-hour webinar for a new product launch and say best of luck sales teams. Knowledge and skills is a never-ending, ongoing thing, and so your sales enablement processes and programs should have that built in. And finally, coaching. I'm sure every seller would like to think that they're a star seller and they don't need any coaching, but the fact of the matter is even the best people need coaching. And I like to use the analogy of professional athletes. Some of the world's most gifted, physically talented people do not go out on a field in any sport and just start running around and playing the sport. There is coaching and there is a ton of practice. Use any professional athlete. They spend more time practicing than they actually do performing. Now think about your average seller. They spend far more time actually playing and most of them very little practicing. Now, I'm not advocating necessarily that they have the same ratio as, say, a professional athlete, but just thinking about that, if you want to be good at something, why aren't you practicing it more and practicing it with a coach who can give you tips to improve? So I think these three key things are critical for a salesperson to be good, and you need to be doing all of them. Of course, that's not it. Then you have the alignment with marketing, sales and marketing, and I already talked about marketing and sales should sit down at the table and develop the content needs together. But then the other thing, and the dollar signs there are not to mean that you should pay marketing more money, but rather marketing should have visibility into what is helping sell in the marketplace. And that's both from a content, but also what the sales reps say. And so that sales and marketing alignment isn't just, okay, what do we need for content? It's also feedback mechanism as to what is working, what's driving sales from a content, from a message perspective. So a good, robust sales enablement process, you're delivering the sellers all those three things, and sales and marketing are completely aligned and constantly talking to each other, from content to feedback mechanisms and everything in between. I'm not making this up, by the way, because there is real impact to this. And this is a study done by Corporate Visions, and what they found is that by combining the content and skills training together, so you have a cohesive package, kind of go back to the three arrows that I had at the sales rep in the last slide, you get a dramatic increase in sales. And if you look at the chart on the left, when an organization focuses only on skills, obviously if you're a high adopter of skills training and coaching, you do better than if you're a low adopter. But look what happens when you take the skills and the content and you align that all together. It's a huge increase in average deal size alone. And so this goes back to my point, is that content or skills or even coaching by themselves isn't enough. You have to combine that all together, because at the end of the day, you have a human being that needs to articulate your value. So why does this work? And it's actually backed by brain science. And so I'm going to use an analogy here. The human brain is more likely to remember information when it is engaged and curious. So I'm going to use, apologies if anybody is an opera fan, but most of the time when I talk about this, most people aren't. If we were sitting around a dinner table and someone was an opera fan and they were telling us all about the opera, and we're having a conversation and you're not that interested in opera, chances are you're kind of going to tune out. You might hear a couple things, probably going to eavesdrop on a conversation at the table next to you. And then the next morning, if I asked you what you remembered, chances are it'd be very little. Now, let's imagine someone has invited us to go to the opera tomorrow night, and we know operas operas are a story, and it's always good if you know the story ahead of time because it's easier to relate to it. So now we're a little bit more interested and curious, and if we go back to that dinner table and someone starts talking about the opera, now knowing that we're going the next day, we're going to be more curious and more engaged. So you're more attentive, you listen, and your brain retains the information. And if I ask you the next day what you remember, you're going to remember a lot more. Now draw that analogy to, say, maybe a product launch training that you do for your sales reps. If your sales rep doesn't have an immediate need to sell that product, sure, they're going to attend your 1-hour webinar training or whatever it may be. They'll retain very little of it, and then sometime in the future they'll need that information, and chances are they'll go looking on your content repository and dig up the information. Now imagine that sales rep has a call tomorrow at 9 a.m. on the new product, and you're doing product training. They're going to be super attentive. And so the question is, as you develop your sales enablement programs, how do I develop training so it is available in the moment when someone is curious and engaged? Because that is when they're going to retain the information. I'm not saying do away with 1-hour product webinar trainings and things like that, but I think you have to think about ways to augment the training so you can tap into exactly how the brain works. So I'm going to go through a couple tips and tricks that you can use for brain science and how it works, and I'll even talk a little bit about the physiology of the brain and why some of these work. So first, it is proven that learning builds on prior knowledge. And the physiology behind this is the way that your brain remembers things is it creates neural pathways. And if you think back to biology class, the neurons in the brain have these things called dendrites. Those are the kind of like tree or branch-looking things. As you create these pathways, dendrites form and fuse together. When you first learn something, it will be a fairly weak connection. And if you don't reinforce it, don't practice it, chances are your brain will forget it, and actually the physical connection disconnects. However, the more you reinforce it and the more you practice it, physically the dendrites start to get stronger and stronger and stronger, and so that physical connection in the brain, although it's on a microscopic level, gets thicker. So the implication here then for sales enablement is knowing that you need to build reinforcement training in addition to the core training materials you're doing. You're physically building stronger neural pathways within your sellers' brains. The second one is, and I mentioned this a little bit, practice leads to stronger connections in the brains. So as you build those pathways, also what happens is a fatty layer actually forms over top of it. Think about you build a connection as actually like a protective layer. And this is why I'll use another analogy. In golf, there is no physical advantage a professional golfer has over the average human being when it comes to putting. It doesn't take strength, it doesn't take speed, all it takes is a little bit of accuracy. But why is it that the average pro golfer can putt about have half as many putts during a round than a normal golfer? Now, granted, they get closer to the hole, so that sometimes you could argue that they don't have as far as distance to go. But if I were to put two people 10 feet away, I guarantee you a pro golfer would probably be 50% more accurate. The reason is practice. They train their brain, which obviously controls your body movement, to be very precise and be able to do it repeatedly. So, for sales, and back to my sports analogy, best athletes in the world practice, 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 and you want to create the best salespeople in the world. Why aren't you doing more practice? My third one is the type of practice you do directly impacts what you learn. And so having a kind of fabricated environment where people are practicing might be okay, but it's really better if you do things like role play. And it doesn't have to be face-to-face. It can be over the phone. There are video tools. But make your sales reps practice real-life situations and hard situations. You know your customers are going to throw your competition at you. They're going to tell you where you're weak. Make your sales reps practice the hard situations and not just hear the three key value propositions. They'll get better. It's back to the putting. Make them expert putters. Next one is your working memory has limits. So there was a study done at Stanford that was interesting that will put this into a little more light. They had a bunch of students, and they said, memorize these three numbers, and then walk down the hallway to the next room, and my colleague will go through the second part of the test. And, oh, by the way, there's a table outside. Grab some snacks. And they had the table divided into two things. They had some cake, and they had some fruit. So the first group of students went in, had to remember 3 numbers, and then they took a second group of students, and they said, memorize these 7 digits, head down to the end of the hallway, meet my colleague. By the way, if you want to grab some snacks, feel free. The people that had to remember 7 digits were twice as likely to have cake than fruit, because their working memory was so stuck on remembering just 7 digits that your subconscious comes into play when making a decision. Your subconscious loves to please itself. Cake is a lot sweeter. And so the end of the study was that just 7 digits can turn your brain off in terms of thinking about things consciously now, and your subconscious comes into play. Let's go back to the 6.8 buyers. Your sellers, there's no way your sellers have the brain capacity to be able on the spot to constantly talk in the language of each of those 6.8 buyers. So they need job aids and they need coaching in the moment, because their working memory is not going to be able to retain everything you need them. The best way to do this is to keep that coaching and the reminders and the memory boosters short and digestible, and try to deliver it in the moment to them. It's great if you have lots of reference materials and playbooks that are 100 pages long, but no salesperson's ever going to remember the 100-page playbook. But if I'm going to talk to the VP of sales and I have 3 key points, wouldn't it be in the playbook on page 97, wouldn't it be great if you could just give me the 3 key points to a VP of sales in the moment I'm going to go talk to the VP of sales? So chunking up playbooks and then being able to deliver them in short kind of memory boosters is a much more effective way to arm your sales reps. And then finally, sleep impacts learning and memory. And sadly, I don't have any tips for you here. It would be great to have nap time like preschool, but it is proven that sleep helps your brain's ability to retain information. I think the key point here, and an underlying theme for all of these, is that chances are you have too much information for your sales reps to digest, and they're not going to retain it in working memory. The best thing you can do is develop programs, implement tools, so that sales reps get bursts of information in the moment when they need it, of course alongside the content. Content is still important, but back to the theme of the webinars, content doesn't sell, people do. And so to wrap up, I think the key point and a key thing for you to think about is, am I delivering knowledge, and am I delivering training, am I delivering coaching when the sales rep needs it alongside of the content? So, 5 key points that I want you to take away with. We just talked about it, content and coaching. Make sure it's contextually relevant, because remember, back to my opera example, when you're curious, you're more likely to retain the information. Deliver it in their workflow. If they have to go to a sales portal and look at a 100-page playbook and try to find what they need in the 100-page playbook, I guarantee you it's not going to work. So thinking about chunking it up and delivering it in their workflow. Deliver those memory boosters and the coaching. Make sure when you do that you keep it short and digestible. Our recommendation is 2 to 3 minutes tops. A seller will take the time to do that. Anything over 5 minutes is too much time in their day. And then back to the professional athletes. Coach and practice regularly. Even the best athletes in the world practice all year round, every day. So, with that, I want to say thank you for attending the webinar. We have more information and some tips on how to chunk up training and coaching on our website at veloinc.com. You can look through some of the briefs and white papers. And we hope to see you on a future webinar coming up. Thank you very much.